Welcome to the deep dive. We're incredibly glad you decided to join us today because we have a lot to cover.
We really do. Thanks for having me.
So if you look at the internet health and wellness space right now, I mean, it is an absolute avalanche of noise.
Oh, yeah. It's overwhelming.
Right. Like one influencer insists you need to be eating 6 micro meals a day to keep your metabolism revved, and then literally the next swipe tells you that eating anything more than once a day is practically criminal.
Exactly. The sheer volume of conflicting advice makes it nearly impossible to figure out what actually works.
Which is exactly why we're here. Today, our mission is to completely bypass that noise. We've gathered a formidable stack of source material for you.
We're looking at clinical protocols, some really fascinating patient case studies, and personal self-experiments.
Yeah, from some of the top metabolic and neurological experts operating today. We're calling this collection Expert Protocols for Metabolic and Neurological Vitality.
That's a mouthful, but it's accurate.
It is, and we are going to act as your shortcut to being well-informed here. We're distilling these complex papers into actionable insights, and we're going to do it without burying you in medical jargon. So, okay, let's unpack this.
To really get the most out of these sources, we need to establish a foundational paradigm first. Like, how are we viewing the body today?
Right, because a lot of us were taught to view human health as just, an accounting problem.
Or a sheer test of discipline.
Ah.
But true vitality, that deep, sustainable energy you want, whether you're trying to optimize your cognitive performance at work or maybe deciphering a lingering health issue, it is not a simple math equation.
No, it's a beautifully complex, interconnected web.
Exactly. These experts are showing us that vitality requires a precise harmonization of our physical environment, our systemic hormones, the specific chemical building blocks in our nervous system.
And even our deeply held psychological beliefs, which we'll get into later. It's wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
So whether you're trying to figure out a stubborn health issue or you're just wildly curious about how the human machine operates, there are going to be massive aha moments in this deep dive for you.
I want to start with the metabolism aspect.
Oh, good.
Because the protocols from Dr. Jason Fung, they challenge pretty much everything we learned in middle school health class.
They completely rewrite the textbook.
Yeah. He's a nephrologist who focuses heavily on metabolic health, and his core thesis is that we need to stop obsessing over calories.
Right, and focus almost entirely on hormone management, specifically insulin and cortisol.
The argument is that the body isn't a bomb calorimeter, right? It's not just incinerating whatever we put into it. It's a hormonal thermostat.
And the problem with the thermodynamic model, the idea that a calorie is simply a calorie regardless of its source, is that it completely ignores the biological reaction that occurs once food actually enters your digestive tract.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, Dr. Fung illustrates this through a concept he calls vanishing caloric density.
Like with processed foods.
Exactly. When food scientists engineer a highly processed snack, let's say a cheese puff, they design it to literally melt on the tongue.
Hey.
And because it dissolves almost instantly, it bypasses the stretch receptors in your stomach. It completely fails to trigger the physical satiety signals that travel via the vagus nerve to the brain.
So you could consume a massive caloric load of those cheese puffs.
And your brain will still register that you are physically empty.
Wow. Compare that to what Fung calls heavy foods.
Right, the high-volume, physically dense foods like steel-cut oats or a massive plate of broccoli.
Those foods require mechanical breakdown.
They do. They physically distend the stomach lining, which sends a loud, clear signal to the brain to stop eating long before the caloric intake matches that of the processed food.
There is a specific study cited here by Dr. David Ludwig that isolates this mechanism perfectly, and I found this fascinating.
The oatmeal study.
Yeah. He took 2 groups. He fed one group instant oatmeal and the other group steel-cut oats. The crucial detail here is that both bowls had the exact same number of calories.
And the exact same macronutrient profile of carbohydrates.
Right. So on paper, under the old calorie in, calorie out model, the body should react identically.
Or they didn't.
Not at all. The people who ate the finely ground instant oats absorbed the glucose so rapidly that it caused a massive insulin spike.
Followed by a crash.
Exactly. A crash that left them significantly hungrier. They actually ended up eating a much larger lunch later in the day compared to the steel-cut oat group.
Because the instant oats were essentially pre-digested by the manufacturing process, the biological reaction was different because the hormonal response was different.
It's all about insulin.
Right. Insulin's primary job is to shuttle glucose into cells and store excess energy as fat. When insulin is spiked, The body locks away its fat stores and refuses to burn them for energy.
Which is why those subjects felt hungry again so quickly.
Their cells were literally crying out for energy because the insulin had locked the pantry doors.
But hold on, if we're tossing out the calorie model, how do we explain the 1990s Dr. Rudy Leibel study?
The overfeeding study.
Yeah. The sources mention subjects being force-fed up to 10,000 calories a day to force a 10% gain in body weight. Obviously, if you eat 10,000 calories, you are going to gain weight.
You are.
Physics doesn't just stop, so how does this invalidate the calorie model?
Well, they absolutely gained weight. But the key to Leibel's study isn't the weight gain itself, is how the body fought back against that caloric surplus.
What do you mean?
When these subjects were overfed, their resting metabolic rates didn't stay static. Their internal furnaces automatically revved up.
They burned more.
Yes. They burned an extra 500 calories a day entirely on their own in this desperate attempt to burn off the excess energy and return to their baseline weight.
That's incredible.
Their bodies were actively resisting the change. It proves that energy expenditure is dynamic and hormonally regulated. It's not fixed.
Which flows perfectly into the work of metabolic scientist Dr. Ben Bikman. This was a massive shift in perspective for me.
Bikman's work is revolutionary.
He says we are looking at the wrong metric entirely when we focus on total fat mass, like the number on the bathroom scale.
Right. Instead, we need to be looking at fat cell size.
Size, not mass.
This is perhaps the most crucial distinction in modern metabolic science. We all have a genetic limit to how many fat cells we can produce.
Okay.
When we consume excess energy, those fat cells expand. Dr. Bikman explains that when these cells become dangerously enlarged, a state called hypertrophic species, they become physically sick.
Sick? How?
They start leaking pro-inflammatory cytokines and free fatty acids directly into the bloodstream. And critically, they become insulin resistant.
And this ties directly into the personal fat threshold, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because the sources pull data from the UK Biobank and the China Health and Nutrition Survey, showing that ethnicity plays a massive role in this threshold.
What's fascinating here is that the structural capacity of fat tissue is highly genetic. The data reveals that a South Asian individual sitting at a standard, supposedly healthy BMI of 24 faces the exact same statistical risk for developing type 2 diabetes as a white European individual sitting at an obese BMI of 30.
That is mind-blowing.
It is. The South Asian individual's fat cells simply reach their maximum expansion capacity much earlier.
So this is why someone can look relatively thin on the outside, but suffer from profound, life-threatening metabolic dysfunction internally.
Exactly. Their fat cells are hypertrophic and leaking toxins. Even if their overall body mass is low, the thermostat is broken.
To bring this out of the abstract, there's an incredible case file in the sources from a citizen scientist named David Etheridge.
His story is fantastic.
David was facing a massive metabolic crisis. He was carrying excess weight, he had sky-high blood pressure, and his doctors found a calcium score of 450.
And for context, a calcium score over 400 means you have extensive, highly dangerous calcified plaque in your arteries.
It puts you at a severe risk for a major cardiac event.
Right, a heart attack waiting to happen.
No. But instead of just waiting for it, David inverted the standard food pyramid and utilized something called sequential eating.
Sequential eating is a brilliant, entirely mechanical intervention.
Because David didn't even necessarily change what he was eating at first, it was how he was eating it.
Sequence.
Right. He structured his meals to consume his fats and proteins first, then he ate his fibrous vegetables, and finally he saved any carbohydrates for the very end of the meal.
Just rearranging the plate.
By simply rearranging the sequence, he radically altered his blood work. He lost 65 pounds. He dropped his A1C, which measures your average blood sugar levels, down to a hyper-healthy 5.1.
Wow.
And his triglycerides plummeted from a dangerous 285 down to 72. He eventually got off his statins and his blood pressure medications.
It's amazing.
How does merely changing the order of the food on your plate create that kind of biological turnaround?
It comes down to gastric emptying and the pyloric valve.
Okay.
When you consume fats and proteins first, they trigger the release of GLP-1 and cholecystokinin. Those are hormones that slow down digestion.
So it puts the brakes on.
Exactly. By the time the carbohydrates enter the stomach, the digestive process has been intentionally bottlenecked. The carbs are forced to digest slowly.
They trickle into the bloodstream.
Right, trickling glucose rather than flooding it. This completely flattens the insulin spike. And when insulin remains low and stable, the body can safely access its stored fat for fuel.
which lowers those triglycerides.
And allows the arterial inflammation driving that high calcium score to cool down.
Now, if someone is trying to build that kind of hormonal stability, the sports dietetics protocol from Emily Mitchell offers a really concrete target.
Yeah, she gets very specific with the numbers.
She advises aiming for 30 to 35 grams of protein per meal, or about 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight daily.
Elite athletes use this exact strategy. They combine protein with carbohydrates post-workout and even utilize high-protein pre-sleep snacks.
To keep muscle synthesis and hormonal repair running while they sleep.
Yes, because protein isn't just for building biceps. It provides the literal structural amino acids required to manufacture those metabolic enzymes and hormones we are trying to regulate.
So we've talked about how to fuel the engine with the right foods and the right sequences.
Right.
But what happens if the engine itself is fundamentally clogged? Let's talk about the environmental and internal factors that can completely hijack your vitality, even if your diet is flawless.
This is the huge blind spot in standard medical checkups.
Oh, absolutely.
We can obsess over macros and meal timing all day, but if we don't audit the environment we exist in and how the master regulator, our thyroid, is responding to that environment, we will remain chronically fatigued.
The sources heavily feature Dr. Mark Hyman's approach to environmental medicine here.
Yes.
His entire focus is on proactively reducing our daily toxic load. We are talking about swapping out plastic food containers for glass or stainless steel,
Filtering drinking water.
using personal care products free of endocrine disruptors, and actively avoiding the dirty dozen.
The conventionally grown produce heavily sprayed with pesticides.
Right. And I know it sounds like hypervigilance to some people.
It does, but we have to understand the cellular mechanism. Our bodies evolved to clear natural metabolic waste.
Not synthetic chemicals.
Right, not the thousands of synthetic chemicals introduced over the last century.
Dr. Hyman actually learned this the hard way. There's a terrifying story in here about his time living in China.
Oh, the coal plants.
Yeah. He was in a region where the industrial air pollution from nearby coal plants was so thick, it literally obscured the buildings across the street.
Just breathing that in every day.
And while living there, his body's detox pathways simply crashed. He developed severe heavy metal toxicity from the air,
Which triggered debilitating chronic fatigue.
severe brain fog, muscle damage. Conventional medicine couldn't explain what was happening to him, which forced him to research clinical detoxification protocols just to survive.
He had to become his own doctor.
He utilized aggressive sweating therapies, targeted hydration, and upregulated his consumption of the broccoli family, garlic, and onions.
Heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium are insidious because they are molecular mimics.
What does that mean, molecular mimics?
So at the cellular level, your mitochondria require essential minerals like zinc or magnesium to produce ATP.
Which is energy.
Right, the raw energy currency of your body. Heavy metals will literally bind to those exact same receptor sites, locking out the good minerals and halting energy production.
So they act as a biochemical brake pedal.
Exactly. The sulfur-rich foods Hyman used, the garlic, onions, cruciferous vegetables, they contain compounds that physically bind to those heavy metals in the bloodstream.
Allowing the liver to package them up and excrete them safely.
Yes.
But toxins aren't the only unseen blocker. The master switch for that mitochondrial engine is the thyroid.
The thyroid is everything.
Dr. Amy Horniman's clinical nutrition protocol maps out the deep interconnection between the thyroid and our sex hormones. She makes it clear that you cannot treat a testosterone or estrogen deficiency without first investigating the thyroid.
The hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis, or HPT axis, it dictates the metabolic rate of every single cell in your body. But conventional medicine often relies on a really oversimplified view of how thyroid hormones function in the tissue.
Right, the classic T4 versus T3 debate.
Yes.
Dr. Horniman argues that if you have an underactive thyroid, you have to advocate for active T3 replacement, not just the standard T4 medications like Synthroid.
It's vital.
There's a patient case in the outline about a woman named Laura that perfectly highlights why this matters.
I remember Laura's case.
Laura was taking her prescribed Synthroid faithfully, but she still felt like a zombie. She was sleeping all the time, gaining weight, shivering. When Dr. Horniman ran her labs, she didn't just check the standard TSH, she looked at a specific marker called reverse T3.
That's the key.
Laura's reverse T3 was critically high at a score of 21. Dr. Horniman diagnosed Laura's body as being in a state of cellular hibernation.
Let me clarify the mechanism there.
Yeah.
Because it is crucial for you to understand if you're listening.
Please do.
The thyroid gland primarily produces T4, which is an inactive storage form of the hormone. To actually generate heat and energy, your liver and gut must convert that T4 into T3.
The active form.
Yes, the active form. However, if your body perceives danger, say from chronic psychological stress, systemic inflammation, or the heavy metal toxicity we just discussed, it intentionally blocks that conversion.
It does it on purpose.
Yes. Instead of making active T3, it converts the T4 into reverse T3. And reverse T3 is essentially a dummy key.
A dummy key.
It fits into the cell's receptor lock, but it doesn't turn the ignition. It just blocks the active T3 from getting in.
So Laura was essentially drowning in inactive medication.
Exactly. Her cells were starving for energy because her body was shuttling all her medication into this dummy key.
Dr. Horniman's fix was to lower the T4 dose and introduce direct T3 replacement to bypass that internal roadblock entirely.
So what does this all mean? It means that if you were doing the grueling work of maintaining a perfect diet and sleep schedule, but you still suffer from unexplained weight resistance or brain fog, you shouldn't internalize that as a lack of willpower.
It's not your fault.
You are likely dealing with a mechanical bottleneck, whether it's environmental toxins jamming up your mitochondria or a thyroid conversion failure flooding your system with reverse T3.
These are physical roadblocks that require specific, targeted interventions to clear.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the most fascinating transition in this material, in my opinion.
The neurology.
Yeah. We've established that systemic hormones and cellular energy are dictated by physical inputs. But how does this apply to the brain?
We tend to view psychiatric issues as these abstract chemical imbalances.
Right. But Dr. Cynthia Keller's pediatric and post-COVID protocols bridge that gap entirely. We are looking at the brain-gut nutrient axis here.
The brain is an incredibly greedy organ.
It uses so much energy.
It consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy.
Yeah.
And it requires a constant massive influx of specific vitamins and amino acids to physically manufacture the neurotransmitters that dictate your mood, your focus, and your behavior.
Dr. Keller's post-viral protocols are wild.
They really are.
She pulses highly specific nutrients to treat severe psychiatric symptoms that emerge after viral illnesses like COVID-19.
She uses a 5 to 7 day monthly protocol,
Providing L-tryptophan to replenish serotonin, paired with vitamin B6 and its active form, P5P, along with methylfolate and zinc to support the production of dopamine.
the raw materials.
There is a patient's story here that honestly sounds like science fiction. She had a teenage patient who became suddenly and severely suicidal after a COVID infection.
Just out of nowhere.
This girl spent an entire year trialing various heavy psychiatric medications, none of which stabilized her.
A whole year.
Dr. Keller assesses her, theorizes that the virus completely depleted her amino acid reserves, and prescribes tryptophan.
Just an over-the-counter amino acid.
Exactly. Within 2 weeks, the suicidality completely vanished.
2 weeks.
How is that biologically possible when a year of advanced pharmaceuticals failed?
Well, pharmaceuticals like SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they work by keeping existing serotonin circulating in the brain for longer periods.
Right, they recycle it.
But they do not create new serotonin. Tryptophan is the literal physical building block the body uses to manufacture serotonin.
So if you're out of the building block,
If a severe viral infection burns through your body's raw materials, an SSRI is essentially trying to squeeze water from a dry sponge.
yeah.
There's nothing there to reuptake.
Wow.
By providing the raw tryptophan, Dr. Keller resupplied the factory.
And it's not just mood. Dr. Keller also treated 4 different 3-year-old toddlers who experienced sudden massive weight gain post-virus.
Yes.
One of them gained 25% of her body weight in a matter of months. And the most important detail here is that their diets hadn't changed at all. They weren't eating junk.
Dr. Keller recognized that their bodies were lacking the nutrient cofactors necessary to transport glucose.
She provided those exact nutrient cofactors, and the toddlers naturally returned to their normal growth curves without restrictive dieting.
Because without those cofactors, the glucose couldn't enter the cells to be burned as energy.
So the body had no choice but to store it as fat.
Exactly. The active form of B6, P5P, is a perfect example of this. P5P is an essential enzyme cofactor required to convert compounds into catecholamines.
Which include dopamine and adrenaline.
Right. If you lack P5P, your brain physically cannot produce the dopamine required for motivation and focus.
So if the brain needs these nutrients to function while awake, it apparently needs an entirely different mechanism to repair itself while asleep.
The sleep protocol.
Dr. Stasha Gomanak's sleep neurology protocol. She argues that chronic sleep disorders are fundamentally a gut microbiome issue.
It's all connected to the gut.
Her protocol involves optimizing vitamin D levels while simultaneously taking a B vitamin complex like a B50 or B100 for a strictly limited 3-month period.
The connection between the gut and sleep is profound. The beneficial bacteria residing in your large intestine are responsible for synthesizing massive amounts of B vitamins.
Okay.
Dr. Gomanak's research suggests that specific B vitamins, particularly B5, are required by the brainstem to induce the temporary paralysis of REM sleep.
So without that paralysis, the brain cannot engage its deep repair mechanisms.
Right. You just don't get restful sleep.
The evidence she cites for B5 pantothenic acid is a clinical study from the 1950s at the Iowa State Prison. And this is dark.
Very dark.
Researchers took a group of convicts and tube-fed them a diet meticulously stripped of all vitamin B5.
Just B5.
The results were immediate and terrifying. Within 2 weeks, the subjects developed agonizing abdominal pain, severe insomnia, and a burning sensation in their hands and feet.
The lack of one single vitamin dismantled their nervous system in 14 days.
And Dr. Gomanak experienced a variation of this in her own clinical practice, right?
She did. She was prescribing vitamin D to her sleep-deprived patients, which initially worked brilliantly. But 2 years later, they returned with joint pain, returning insomnia, and that exact same burning sensation in their extremities.
Why would vitamin D cause a B5 deficiency?
Because biological systems are intimately interconnected.
Yeah.
By driving up vitamin D and initiating massive cellular repair, she inadvertently increased the body's consumption of B vitamins.
Draining their reserves.
Exactly, causing a secondary deficiency. The factory was working overtime, and it just ran out of supplies.
Which is why she added the B100 complex. But I want to push back on this a bit. If B vitamins are so critical for sleep paralysis and repair, why does her protocol insist on stopping the supplements after 3 months?
Good question.
Why not just take them forever to guarantee good sleep?
Dr. Gomanak's own self-experimentation answers that perfectly. She decided to take high doses of B5 continuously, and it resulted in severe restless leg syndrome.
So she overloaded the system.
Taking too much exogenous B5 disrupted the delicate balance. The goal of the 3-month protocol isn't to rely on a pill forever.
It is to provide enough raw material to feed the gut microbiome so that the bacteria recover and resume producing the exact, perfectly titrated dose of B vitamins your body needs naturally.
Exactly. You're jump-starting the natural system.
That focus on holistic, self-sustaining systems aligns perfectly with neurologist Dr. Majid Fatouhi.
Yes, his work is very empowering.
He focuses on preventing cognitive decline not with a magic pill, but through his 5 pillars of brain health. He advocates for rigorous exercise, optimal sleep, targeted nutrition with heavy omega-3s, stress reduction, and active brain training.
Like learning a complex new language.
Right. Dr. Fatouhi's clinical data demolishes the old notion that brain degradation is an inevitable part of aging
The brain is highly plastic.
and responsive to physical demands. He cites a study where participants did moderate to intense stationary biking for an hour 4 times a week.
And the results.
After 12 weeks, brain scans showed that every single participant had visibly increased the physical volume of their hippocampus.
The region dedicated to learning and memory, that's huge.
And for those who can't do intense intervals, he cites another study out of Pittsburgh looking at adults in their 60s who simply walked for 45 minutes 3 times a week.
Just walking.
Just walking. Compared to a control group that only did light stretching, the walking group still grew their hippocampus by 2%.
The mechanism there involves brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
What's that?
When you engage in sustained cardiovascular exercise, your muscles release proteins that travel to the brain and stimulate the production of BDNF.
So it acts like fertilizer for new neurons.
Precisely.
But it's not just physical exercise, it's sensory exercise. Dr. Fatouhi highlights research showing that providing hearing aids to individuals with hearing loss significantly improves their overall cognitive function.
And prevents cortical atrophy.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the auditory nerve is constantly feeding electrical stimulation into the brain.
So when hearing fades, that part of the brain is essentially starved of input.
And begins to atrophy from disuse. Restoring the sensory input physically wakes the tissue back up.
When you look at all of this together, tryptophan curing severe depression, B5 dictating sleep paralysis, walking physically expanding the hippocampus, it completely reframes mental health for me.
It's a total paradigm shift.
These aren't just vague psychological struggles. They are blaring physical starvation signals from an organ desperate for raw materials and stimulation.
Precisely. We've established that the hardware of the human machine is dictated by the environment, our hormones, and our nutrients. But now we have to pivot to the software.
The software, I love that.
We have to examine how our thoughts, our emotional resilience, and our deeply held beliefs exert literal physical force on that hardware.
Let's get into the psychology of vitality, because this completely upends the whole rise and grind, white-knuckle approach to health.
Willpower is outdated.
According to Nir Eyl's behavioral design framework, relying on willpower is a fool's errand. Instead, he focuses on building distress tolerance.
The psychological concept of ego depletion suggests that willpower is a finite cognitive resource.
It runs out.
If you spend all day forcing yourself to ignore a toxic boss or rigidly adhere to a miserable diet, you will inevitably exhaust that mental muscle and break.
So what is distress tolerance?
Distress tolerance is different. It is the cultivated ability to observe psychological or physical discomfort without reflexively seeking to escape it.
And his method for building that tolerance is completely counterintuitive.
Very much so.
He says that if you want to achieve a massive health goal, you shouldn't just sit around visualizing your success. You shouldn't picture yourself at your goal weight or crossing a finish line.
Which is what everyone tells you to do.
Right. Instead, you have to actively visualize the specific miserable obstacles you're going to face and formulate a concrete plan for how you will handle the friction.
Because a fantasy of perfection shatters the moment you encounter real-world stress.
You need a plan for the bad days.
Preparing for the friction allows the brain to remain calm when the obstacle inevitably arises.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The clinical studies Eel cites to prove the biological power of belief are staggering.
Oh, the rat study.
Let's look at the Richter rat study. Researchers took wild rats and placed them in water to measure their baseline swimming endurance. On average, the rats swam for about 15 minutes before they exhausted themselves and gave up.
Okay.
But then the researchers altered the protocol. They put the rats in the water, but right before they were about to sink, they pulled them out.
They saved them.
They let them rest,
Wow.
let them realize they were safe, and then put them back in the water. By doing this, they taught the rats hope.
Hope.
They taught them that rescue was a distinct possibility. Armed with that psychological belief, those rats didn't swim for 15 minutes. They swam for up to 60 hours.
60 hours.
That is a 240 times increase in physical endurance, generated purely by a shift in their psychological state.
From a neurochemical perspective, hope is a massive influx of dopamine.
And dopamine isn't just a reward chemical.
Right. Dopamine doesn't just make you feel good. It alters how your brain calculates the cost of effort.
So when the rats believed survival was possible,
the dopamine surge allowed their brains to unlock emergency reserves of physical stamina that were previously gated off to prevent tissue damage.
And this translates directly to human longevity. The Yale aging study tracked individuals for decades and found that people who held positive, proactive beliefs about the aging process when they were 30 years old ended up living an average of 7.5 years longer than those who held pessimistic views about getting older.
It is an incredible statistic.
7.5 years.
Your psychological framing of aging literally dictates the biological timeline of your cellular senescence.
Ayal also cites a placebo steroid study where experienced weightlifters were given a sugar pill but were told it was a highly advanced experimental steroid.
And what happened?
Because they genuinely believed they were chemically enhanced, they pushed through their normal distress tolerance levels during their workouts. They generated significantly more actual physical muscle mass than they had previously been able to achieve.
The belief didn't magically materialize the muscle, but it altered the brain's governor, allowing them to recruit more motor units and inflict the necessary micro tears in the tissue that lead to growth.
But the absolute peak of this concept is the story of Daniel Gisler. Gisler utilized a technique called hypnosedation to undergo a 55-minute ankle surgery.
Bone surgery.
The doctors were physically cutting into him and using tools to extract metal screws from his bones. And he did this with zero anesthesia, no chemical painkillers.
None.
During the procedure, his blood pressure and heart rate remained completely flat and stable. He accomplished this by mentally separating the mechanical sensation of the procedure from the psychological experience of suffering.
This relies on the gate control theory of pain.
Explain that.
Pain isn't just a physical signal traveling from the ankle to the brain. The brain actively decides whether to open or close the gate that allows that signal to be perceived as suffering.
So Gisler's psychological framing closed the gate. This raises an important question. If the mind can literally override the physical trauma of bone surgery, what kind of biological damage are we doing to ourselves when we fail to manage our everyday emotional distress?
That is the big question.
Dr. Alakanogia's psychiatric protocols address this directly. He argues that processing intense emotions is a physiological necessity, not just a therapeutic luxury.
When you experience a threat or intense anger, your amygdala, the ancient emotional alarm bell of the brain, fires up,
Triggering a cascade of stress hormones.
Right. Dr. Kanogia utilizes the neurobiology of language to disarm this.
He explains that you have to literally put words to the feeling. By forcing yourself to articulate the emotion, you engage the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex,
Which is the linguistic center of the brain.
When that linguistic center activates, it physically sends inhibitory signals to the amygdala, forcing it to calm down.
It's called affect labeling. You are mechanically transferring the brain's energy from the emotional center to the logical processing center.
What? Dr. Kanogia also strictly prescribes what he calls boring breaks throughout the workday, and he completely bans high-arousal social media scrolling before bed.
The doom scrolling.
He argues that doom scrolling doesn't relax you. It requires a massive amount of cognitive willpower to rapidly process all those varied emotional inputs.
Frying the exact neural circuits you need to initiate sleep.
And he also looks at the macro environment of his patients.
Yeah.
We cannot medicate our way out of a fundamentally toxic situation.
Right. There's a patient story about a finance worker who came to Dr. Kanogia desperate for sleep medication and anti-anxiety drugs.
The guy was terrified of his job and couldn't sleep.
But instead of just writing a prescription to numb the amygdala, Dr. Kanogia diagnosed the environment.
He told the patient that his anxiety and insomnia were actually highly functioning, accurate biological signals warning him that he was in danger.
The medical solution was to quit the toxic job.
We have a tendency to pathologize every negative emotion, but fear and anxiety are often the body's deeply evolved data points trying to protect us.
The physical necessity of acknowledging that data is validated by behavioral scientist Leslie John.
Yes, her research proves the immense physiological danger of bottling up feelings.
She looks at the famous James Pennebaker HIV diary study.
Pennebaker took a group of HIV patients and split them in half. One group was instructed to write down their deepest, most closely guarded emotional thoughts in a diary.
And the other group.
The other group was not. The group that engaged in emotional self-disclosure didn't just report feeling psychologically lighter. They exhibited measurable, objective improvements in their blood markers.
Physical changes.
By writing down their secrets, their CD4 T-cell counts stabilized, meaning their immune system function physically improved.
Because the act of active suppression, forcing yourself to hide a secret or maintain a stoic facade, it requires continuous low-level physiological effort.
So keeping a secret is exhausting.
It is a chronic stressor that elevates cortisol. Chronically elevated cortisol suppresses the immune system. When the patients wrote their truths down, they relinquished that chronic physical burden.
And the immune system rebounded.
Exactly.
Brain scans confirm this. When researchers put people in an fMRI machine and have them self-disclose personal information, the reward and pleasure centers of the brain literally light up.
We are biologically incentivized to share our internal state.
Leslie John also points to a fascinating study monitoring the galvanic skin response of preschoolers.
Measuring their stress.
They hooked these kids up to monitors that measure palm sweat, a direct metric of nervous system stress, and had them watch a scary video.
And what did they find?
The children who openly showed fear on their faces, the ones who didn't try to hide it, actually registered significantly less physiological stress than the children who tried to bottle it up and remained stoic.
It is a phenomenal synthesis of the data. Your willingness to speak your truth, your capacity to endure friction with hope, and your ability to label your emotions. These are not merely poetic concepts.
No, they are potent biological interventions.
They directly modulate your heart rate, balance your neurotransmitters, and dictate the resilience of your immune system.
The sheer scope of what we've covered today is staggering, but I don't want to just rattle off a textbook summary of everything we've discussed.
Feels like a process.
We've looked at replacing calorie counting with hormonal management via sequential eating. We've explored how to clear heavy metals and support thyroid conversion to unblock cellular energy.
We've seen how feeding the gut microbiome with B vitamins repairs the sleeping brain.
And how articulating our fears literally alters our immune function. When you look at this entire beautifully complex web, what is the one overarching piece of advice for someone trying to integrate this overwhelming amount of data?
The singular takeaway is that you possess more agency over your biology than you have ever been led to believe. You are not a static machine degrading over time.
But knowledge without application is useless.
So my advice is to reject the urge to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning. Pick one singular intervention we discussed today.
Just one.
Start eating your protein before your carbohydrates tonight, or swap out your plastic water bottle. Or take 10 minutes tomorrow to write down a lingering frustration instead of swallowing it.
Audit your daily habits, introduce one point of friction, and observe how your biological system dynamically responds and adapts.
Start with one thing and build the tolerance.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Throughout this deep dive, we have examined hard clinical evidence that introducing a simple physical molecule like the amino acid tryptophan can entirely resolve a severe psychological crisis like suicidality.
The physical matter dictates the mind.
But in the exact same breath, we've seen that a purely abstract psychological belief can command the body to build physical muscle tissue and allow a man to endure the brutal trauma of bone surgery without a drop of anesthesia.
The mind dictates the physical matter.
So if physical molecules can rewrite our consciousness and our abstract thoughts can literally rewrite our cellular biology, where exactly is the boundary between your physical body and your consciousness?
It makes you wonder.
Are they even two separate entities, or just two inextricably linked languages speaking the exact same truth? Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. Stay curious, keep questioning the mechanics of your own vitality, and we will see you on the next deep dive.